2BC. Thank you for joining me today. We are beginning our study of Genesis this week. So let's go ahead and pray, and we're going to dive right in. God, I thank you so much for today, and I thank you for your word, and I thank you that we get to start at the beginning, and we get to walk through the book of Genesis. And I pray that as we do that, you will just speak to us and transform us and teach us something about yourself. We pray all of this in your holy and precious name. Amen. So this week is the beginning of our study of Genesis, and it is a book of beginnings. This book gives us somewhat the origin story of a lot of things. We have the origin of the world with the accounts of creation. We have origin of humanity. We have the origin of the people of Israel. And we get the beginning story of God and his revelation of himself to humans and how he has been at work and has been active in the world from the beginning. So as we step into this story, one of the questions that I want us to think through every week in and week out is, what does this reveal to us about God? God is our principal actor in the book of Genesis. We will trace what God has done. We are going to be starting with Noah's story today, but we see even from the very beginning, he is the first one doing any action. In the beginning, God created. Genesis is the beginning of that record, the prehistory. So the information that we have in these early chapters is really before recorded history, before we have specific dates and times and chronological markers. So it's the time of the beginning. And so that is where we're going to pick things up today with Noah's story. We're still in the time of the beginning. And if you want more on the first 4 chapters of the book of Genesis, I want to point you to our 2BC Right Now media page, where we have a few videos pulled down for you that overview the beginning of Genesis. And I want to point you specifically to Charlie Date's study of Genesis. He begins and calls Genesis a hymn book, an HIM book, because it is about God, and he's the one who is primarily doing the action. So I encourage you to go check out that video. He does an excellent job of introducing Genesis, and so check that out. And there's also a couple of videos on there by the Bible Project by Tim Mackey, and it has some information about how to read Genesis and what we'll find there. So some really good overview videos. I encourage you to check those out. But we are picking up our study with Noah today. So we are beginning in chapter 5, and we're not going to read chapter 5. It is a genealogy, but it traces the account of Adam's family line from Adam all the way to Noah. If you look with me here at the very end of chapter 5 in verse 28, so we have Lamech, who lived for 182 years. Then he had a son, and he named his son Noah. And it says, he will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. And that is tying back to the curse in Genesis 3, the fall, right, in the garden. And it says, after Noah was born, Lamech lived another 595 years and had other sons and daughters. And it says how long he lived, and then he died. And then it says Noah was 500 years old when he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that is the beginning of Noah's story. And then we kind of get a little break here at the beginning of chapter 6 with a very curious passage that has caused many people over the centuries to scratch their heads and wonder. But we are painted a picture of quite the level of wickedness in the world. It says human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them. And it says the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. And then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. And then it goes on to say the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. And they were the heroes of old, men of renown. So we are left with the question of, who are all of these people? We have the sons of God mentioned, we have the daughters of humans mentioned, and we have the Nephilim mentioned. Who are these people? So the daughters of humans, The daughters of humans, that's probably the easiest one for us to wrap our minds around. They are just female humans. But the sons of God would have been some sort of most likely some sort of cross between, somewhere between the divine and human world. We don't really know exactly. But then the Nephilim would have been the offspring of these sons of God and daughters of humans. And what we can hear in this is that this is a further perversion of what God has created, the order that God had created. And this was somewhat of another attempt to be like God. So we could spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly who these people are. But the truth is, we don't know more than what we have right here in Genesis. But I think it's very helpful to think about this as just that further perversion of what God had created in an attempt to be like God and to not follow what God had set out when he created the world. And then what follows these first 4 verses is a comment about how wicked the world had become. Look at verse 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. That is a staggering statement, that every inclination and thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. So for the ancient people, specifically the ancient Hebrew people, the heart would have been the center of all thought and reflection, somewhat what we would consider the will. This is where this was the source of wisdom and discernment. It was also the center of emotions and feelings and moods and passions and all of those things. So it was the heart, every inclination, every thought, every feeling, every emotion, all of them were evil. This is a picture of total depravity of humanity. The perfect creation that God had made has completely fallen and devolved into something that he didn't create. And we see that God is grieved by this. It says that he regretted that he made human beings on the earth, and he was deeply troubled. And so he said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. And we've talked about this before, but the sinfulness of humanity impacted all of creation, not just humans, impacted the ground. We saw that with the curse. They're going to have to toil to grow things. It impacts us as humans. All of creation is fallen. All of creation is broken because of the sin that humans committed. So here we have this picture of wickedness, this picture of everything that is grieving God to the point that he wants to wipe away all creation. But Noah and his righteousness, look down in verse 9. He was righteous. He was blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. He was the complete opposite. He was the contrast. He was faithfully following God. So God came to Noah and he said, hey, I'm going to wipe away everything, all humanity, all creation, but I want you and your family to be safe. And so he gives Noah these instructions to build an ark. The rest of chapter 6 really lays out these instructions that God gives. And we're not really told anything that Noah says here, just that he's obedient. God does the speaking and the acting here. He tells Noah what to do. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood. Put rooms in it. Cover it with pitch inside and out. Tells him how long to make it, how wide to make it, how tall to make it, what kind of roof to put on it, and to put a door in the side. And then he gives him instructions for also bringing animals onto the ark with his family, with his wife and with his sons and their wives, how they're all to be in the ark together. He's going to save his whole family. And he's also going to save 2 of every kind of animal. So here's Noah and going about his life being faithful to God, and God comes to him and says, hey, I need you to do all this stuff. I imagine it's quite shocking what God is asking him to do. Build this giant boat and I'm going to flood the world. I mean, Noah didn't have a frame of reference for this, but he was obedient anyway. God called him to do something that was hard. He called him to do something that was out of the ordinary, and he did it. And we're not told if he asked God any questions. We're just told that he did it. He was obedient, just as God had commanded him. And then we come to chapter 7, and we get some further instructions about how many of the different types of animals. Take 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, and gives him some more specific instructions of that. And then he says that 7 days from now, this is verse 4, I'm going to send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And so we're told again that Noah is obedient and he does all that God commands him to. So as we are thinking through this story of Noah, I want us to look back at Genesis 1 for just a second. So if you want to flip over there with me for a minute, let's look at the beginning of Genesis. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And so in many ways, this flood that we are about to see happen here in Noah's story is going from creation, we have this place of creation, back to this place of uncreation, back to this place of chaos. Back to the chaos that it all started with God hovering over the surface of the waters and then calling light and land and all of the things that he created out of that chaos. So it's an uncreation. The flood is going backwards, back to the beginning. But yet God saves Noah and his family. And then we were told in verse 6, we're given a time marker, not a chronological marker, because remember, this is prehistory. So before we have recorded dates in history, like written down history, Noah was 600 years old. So we first met Noah at the end of chapter 5. He was 500 and he had his sons, and now he is 600 years old whenever the flood happens. And they enter the ark with the animals. And after the 7 days, the flood came. And then we're given even more specific time here in verse 11. It tells us which day of the month it is in Noah's 600th year. And let's look here in verse 11. It says, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened, and rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. So we get this picture of rain coming from above and and water bursting up from below. So there is just chaos everywhere. And it's that return to that place of chaos with God hovering over that water, over that chaos. And then it kind of circles back again here in verse 13, and we have more details given to us about Noah and his family entering the ark and all the creatures that came. It says, all the creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. That's verse 15. And I love what it says in verse 16. It says, the Lord shut him in. So we get this picture of God shutting them in the ark. God is providing for them. He is protecting them. And one of the things we notice in this section of Noah's story is there's a lot of repetition. We have repetition of the instructions that God gives to Noah. And they're not exact repetition, but they have maybe more details or different details. We have repetition of numbers of the 40 days and the 40 nights and all the different numbers that we see there. We have this increasing of the water. We start off this swelling of water coming from the ground and coming from the sky. But then we also have this flood kept coming on in verse 17. The waters increased. They lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated. So this section from verse 17 through verse 24, we have this increasing of the water. We have descriptions of how everything that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. And then it's repeated again. The people and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. And it says the waters flooded the earth for 150 days. That is a very long time. I mean, that's half a year. So it rained. We had 40 days and 40 nights of rain. And then we had this continuing increasing flood. It was flooding over the earth. Chapter 8 begins this way. But God remembered Noah. And the word for remembered here is zakar. That's the Hebrew word. And it connotes more than just not forgetting or recalling to mind. It connotes deliverance language. God is attending to Noah and his family. He's delivering them. He is taking notice of them, renewing that commitment here that God has to him. One of the commentaries I was reading this week made the comment that when God remembers Noah, things begin to happen. And what we see here in chapter 8 is going the opposite way than what we've been seeing. We were moving back to a state of uncreation. Now we are moving back. We are moving the opposite direction, in the direction of new creation. And we're going to see God reestablish this covenant with humanity, with all creation. So the waters begin to recede. The springs of the deep closed, the floodgates of heaven closed, the rain stopped falling, the water receded steadily. And at the end of 150 days, the water had gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And this would have been in what is now southeast Turkey, kind of extending down into northwest Iran. So that is where these mountains are. We have this drying of the earth. The earth is healing, the waters are receding, and creation is beginning again. At the very beginning of chapter 8, it says that God sent a wind over the earth to cause all of this to happen. And this word for wind in Hebrew is the same word for breath and spirit, ruach. And we see chaos diminishing and the earth begin to heal. The waters are receding and new creation can begin. And we have this picture of Noah sending out the raven who keeps flying back and forth. There's nowhere for it to land. And then he sends out a dove. And it couldn't find anywhere, so it comes back. And he waits for another 7 days and sends out another dove again. And it returns with an olive leaf. And then he sends out this dove after another week. And this time the dove doesn't return because it has found a place to nest. And so we're told that by the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, so this is almost an entire year, the water had dried up and it was completely dry. And God tells Noah and his family to come out of the ark. And so they do. And he says, bring out all of your family, bring out every creature, so that they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number. So he gives that command to be fruitful, to multiply, to fill the earth. So Noah comes out, and Noah's response is to worship God. He builds an altar. Look at verse 20. Builds an altar to the Lord and sacrifices some of the clean animals and clean birds. And the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. So things haven't really changed for humans. They're still inclined towards evil. But God is not going to wipe them away as he has done. And this brings us to chapter 9. In this chapter, I love this covenant that we see here. God makes a covenant with Noah. Really, he makes a covenant with all creation. It says that he blesses Noah and his sons. He commands them to be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth and all the birds in the sky and every creature that moves along the ground and all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. So he gives them this command to go out, and it mirrors the commands that he gave to Adam and Eve back at the very beginning. Be fruitful, multiply. You have dominion over all the animals. You can eat all of these things. And he gives them some prohibitions about what not to eat. In verse 4, don't eat any meat that has lifeblood. And don't be violent, those types of things. And then God says to Noah and his sons that he's establishing his covenant. So in verse 9, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. So it's so interesting because this covenant isn't just with humanity, it's with all creation. All creatures are included in this. And it isn't based on, it's different than some of our other covenants that we see because it's not based on Noah and all the creatures fulfilling something. God is declaring his loyalty to his creation, saying, I will never again destroy it like this. That he is choosing to be in a relationship with humanity and with all creation. This covenant is a divine gift. It's eternal. It is filled with grace, and it doesn't have any stipulations. God is for creation, for his creation. And he gives them a sign, and the sign is a rainbow, as we know. It is a sign that of the covenant between God and the earth. And whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. And never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. And when the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures. What a beautiful picture of God's love and God's devotion to creation, God's provision and constant sustaining of creation. Even though he knows that humanity is still evil, even though he knows that humanity's actions are going to continue to impact creation, the animals, the land. He knows all of that, but he chooses to be in a covenant relationship with us, with the earth anyways. And it would be so great if Noah's story ended there, with them being fruitful and multiplying and God reestablishing this covenant with all creation. Be a great place to stop. But that's not where it stops. And instead, we see it doesn't take that long for humans to just go back in an evil direction again. And unfortunately, that is the plight of humanity, and we're going to see this happen over and over again on the pages of Genesis. So we're told a little bit more about Noah's sons. It's Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it says, we were told Ham was the father of Canaan, and they came out, and it says they came out of the ark, and from them came the people who were scattered over the whole earth. And then we're given some more details about their lives. So we have Noah is described as a man of the soil. So he's one who cares for the earth. We're told he plants a vineyard, and then we're told that he has too much to drink and he becomes drunk and he is uncovered inside his tent. And then we're told that Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders, and they walked in backward and covered their father's naked body. And they did not look on their father's nakedness. And so when Noah wakes up, he found out what his youngest son had done, and he curses Canaan. And we were told earlier that Ham is the father of Canaan. It says, cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. And he says that Canaan will be the slave of Shem. And so Canaan then, as we know, the Canaanites, they're the ones that the people of Israel drive out of the land later on when they come back from Egypt, when Moses brings them out of Egypt. And then Joshua leads them on the conquest of the land. They are to drive out the Canaanites. So we're given the origin of Ham. And so what happens here is that we see the humans are still wicked. What exactly is the sin that Ham commits? We're not told. There's a lot of speculation on what is happening in this scene. And we just, honestly, we don't know exactly what happens, but we know it's bad because of how Noah responds. We know it's bad how Shem and Japheth respond, and they are honoring their father by their actions, by covering him without looking on his nakedness. And so we know that what it was is that it was bad. But one of the things that I think is important to notice here is that the focus of this isn't on what Ham did. It's on the curse of Canaan, almost giving us a reason for what happens to the Canaanites in later parts of history. They will be enemies of the people of Israel. And so we see that starting all the way here back at almost the very beginning. And that ends the story of Noah. because what follows in chapter 10 is what is often called the Table of Nations. And we'll get into that in our next video. So this video of Noah is going to cover 3 weeks of our Sunday school curriculum. So you can listen to whatever part fits where we are in our lesson. And then we will pick up with chapters 10 and 11 in a couple weeks. So I hope you will join me back. I'll see you later. Bye.